Reform Party leader Choi Moon-gil held an emergency press conference. I declare my candidacy for president here today, supported by the wishes of the citizens hoping for reform. The sudden announcement startled the reporters. Although it was the fourth largest party in the National Assembly, the Reform Party had only 9 members. Moreover, Choi was not particularly well known enough to run for president. Well, there are always people running for office without a chance of winning. What made you decide to run? What do you think about your chances of winning? Choi Moon-gil confidently answered the reporters' questions. Many citizens are fed up with the entrenched two-party politics. I will definitely become president and reform the nation, creating a South Korea where justice flows like a river. I watched on TV and couldn't help but exclaim, "Impressive." In this election, Lee Jong-hae presented security and economic issues, while Hyo Chong-min focused on punishing the regime. Suddenly, Lee Jong-hae began calling for a renewal of the party, shifting the mood significantly. She stated her commitment to becoming a new party for the people and took a stand against Park Si-hyung. Clearly, it was shaping into a narrative of regime change and accountability. Now, even Choi Moon-gil from the Reform Party announced his candidacy. This changed the landscape from one with one conservative and one progressive candidate to a three-way race with one conservative and 2 progressive candidates. While Choi Moon-gil claims to advocate for radical reform, his appeal may be limited, but he has a small group of passionate supporters. If they vote for him, progressive votes will be dispersed. Taekyu asked with curiosity, "What kind of maneuvering is this? It seems he's got some dirt and is blackmailing them." As Chairman Im Jin-yong said, it seems they are not willing to peacefully hand over power. After all he had done during his presidency, is he now desperately trying to secure his own position until the end? I recalled the incident with Park Si-hyung. Taekyu and I were arrested in turn. The staff suffered from inspections and the company was raided. Every day, conservative groups flocked to the company to protest, and Senior Ji-hong was hospitalized after being assaulted by a mob. Protesters even surrounded my mother's house, forcing her to flee as if she were being chased out. I can endure everything else, but I can't let that last incident go. I have no intention of letting this slide. I need to figure something out. While Park Si-hyung mobilized the authorities against us, we also used every means to bring him down. Unfortunately, we found nothing decisive. Taekyu nodded. The president is very meticulous. Those engaged in illegal activities tend to be the most diligent. There were suspicions piled up like a truckload and countless minor irregularities. Yet most were never even investigated, and those that were managed to be attributed to personal misconduct of acquaintances. As for the protest incident, they claimed it was not a corruption issue at the regime level, but rather a personal misstep by a secretary from the Chief of Staff's office at the Blue House. For reference, right after the incident broke, Secretary Lee Il-seon went on vacation and has been missing. He cut off contact with his family, and his phone has been off, leading to jokes that the National Intelligence Service must have sent a red Maytais loaded with emergency supplies. Could a change in administration truly reveal Park Si-hyung's corruption? When the regime changes, the Korean Democratic Party, no, the Free Citizens Party may shift from ruling to opposition, but it still remains the dominant party. Naturally, they wouldn't agree to investigations exposing the previous regime's faults, likely spinning it as political revenge instead. Investigation into a former president carries immense political weight. Moreover, judging by Park Si-hyung's character, he would have thoroughly destroyed evidence and silenced those involved. Right now, while the lower-level guys are loyal, it'll all end once he steps down, right? Park Si-hyung has money. In modern society, money is a powerful weapon in itself. The reason I could remain safe despite being targeted by the regime was because I had money. Otherwise, I might have been arrested again by now, possibly over baseless sex scandal allegations. Park Si-hyung clearly recognized that the presidency was a temporary position. Thus, throughout his term he focused on converting power into wealth. The result is PS. Even after retirement, Park Si-hyung still has PS. And PS will serve as his shield until he dies. In the end, it's PS. It's an unlisted company, but considering its sales and operating profit, its corporate value is estimated to exceed 1 trillion won. At this point, it rivals major corporations. Officially, PS has no connection to President Park Si-hyung. It's just his brother Park Si-hon who is the representative. However, Park Si-han is seen as a figurehead, with suspicions that the true owner is Park Si-hyung, as the privileges received over the years seem unreasonable otherwise. The issue of the true ownership of PAS has been controversial since Park Si-hyung announced his candidacy for the presidency. On paper, Park Si-hyung owns no shares in PAS, so Park Si-han seems to be the true owner. However, until earlier this year, Park Hyung-dong, Park Si-han's son, was the representative of 6 overseas PAS corporations, but now it has changed to Park Myung-hoon, Park Si-hyung's son. Park Si-han is transferring management rights not to his own son but to his brother's son. Does this even make sense? Given various circumstances, it's likely that the true owner of PAS is Park Si-hyung. He just can't put his name on the paperwork, so he intends for his son to inherit the company. If Park Myung-hoon can smoothly succeed in management rights, everything will be complete. Hearing this, Taekyu said, "He loves money, doesn't he? How about ruining peace? That's a good idea. People get hurt when they lose something precious. There's no better revenge than taking money from someone who values it the most." PAS relies on Unsung Motors for over 90% of its revenue. Just like the saying goes, if you cook the head, the ears will naturally get cooked. If Unsung Motors collapses, PAS will also fall. But who knows how many years it will take until then. And in reality, Unsung Motors, essentially a domestic monopoly, won't collapse easily. Isn't there a good way to deliver a decisive blow? After pondering for a moment, I looked up to see Taekyu staring at me intently. "What did you see this time? What do you mean? Wasn't it Oracle?" I shook my head. "I was just thinking. It's not something that's so easily visible." Huh. In that moment something came to mind. Unsung car airbag recall. Since I hadn't seen it in a while, it felt somewhat familiar. After a moment I realized that Taekyu was staring at me again. "Is it right this time?" I nodded absent-mindedly. "Yeah." Taekyu grabbed my shoulder and shook me while saying, "Why do you look like that? It's not another major earthquake, right? Or a cosmic collision or the end of the world?" "Thankfully, no. I'm really tired of natural disasters. They say Unsung car will recall because of an airbag issue." Recall. Safety is the most important thing for cars on the road. Therefore, if a significant defect is discovered, a recall must happen. Recalls can be done voluntarily by manufacturers or mandated by the government. The most famous incident was the Toyota recall in 2009. Due to issues with mats and accelerator pedals, a family driving a Lexus in the US tragically died, leading Toyota to recall over 10 million vehicles and face massive fines. Did Unsung car make the airbags? No. Cars are made up of tens of thousands of parts. Among these, there are components directly manufactured by car manufacturers like engines, but most are supplied by partners. For airbags, a handful of leading companies dominate about 80% of the global market with standardized products. I recalled some information I had seen before. They used to get supplies from a German company, but switched to PAS a few years ago. At that, Taekyu's eyes widened. "Wait, are you saying the issue is with what PAS supplied?" "That seems likely." I searched for Unsung car airbags defect on a portal site. Dozens of articles and posts appeared. Most discussed serious accidents where the airbags failed to deploy. Unsung car airbags are famous for not deploying. They say they need to be precisely angled to work, right? Well, I don't really like Unsung cars, but there is some unfairness in this issue. It's a problem when airbags fail to deploy in serious accidents, but it's also troubling when they often deploy in minor accidents. In most accidents, airbags function normally, with failure being extremely rare. However, for those who find themselves in that rare group, dissatisfaction is inevitable. The perception that Unsung car airbags rarely deploy is a misunderstanding stemming from their overwhelming domestic sales. Airbags failing to deploy due to collision angles occurs at similar rates in companies like BMW and Toyota. But can a recall happen simply because airbags don't deploy often? Could there be another reason? What other reason? Maybe the airbags themselves are defective. Taekyu asked, clearly confused. Then why haven't there been any issues until now? You can't know if an airbag is functioning correctly until it deploys. Driving often involves minor accidents, but it's extremely rare to experience a significant crash that deploys airbags. Out of 100 cars, only one might have airbags deploy within 10 years. In such severe accidents, Serious injuries or fatalities aren't surprising, making it difficult to notice issues with airbags. While the specific defect is unknown, the cause must be one of two things: a production issue or a design flaw. If it's a production issue, we can recall just the vehicles from that specific period, but if it's a design flaw, we'll need to recall all cars equipped with PAS airbags. How many cars would that involve? Unsung Motors sells over 8 million cars worldwide in a year. PAS has been supplying airbags for over 6 years. Probably around 50 million. Saying it's 50 million sounds nice, but that's more than the total number of cars in South Korea. So what would the cost be? Even estimating 100,000 won per car for 50 million cars, that's 5 trillion won. What? Taekyu was stunned, his mouth agape. In recent times we might have been making good money, but 5 trillion is an amount even major corporations struggle to handle. How many large companies in Korea have 5 trillion won in cash? This would result in damages comparable to the L6 explosion disaster. Samsung Electronics is a leading global corporation, so they could withstand it, but PAS is just a mid-sized company. Naturally, they can't handle such a loss. If a full recall of airbags ever becomes necessary, it would guarantee bankruptcy. The primary liability lies with PAS for supplying defective products, but if PAS goes bankrupt and can't compensate, then Unsung Motors would be responsible. On top of that, problems arising during the recall process, along with damage to company image and decreased sales, add to the burden. I muttered while watching President Park Si-hyung's figure on the news. If this goes well, I might be able to take him out in one shot. The Takata airbag recall is the largest automotive recall in history, affecting approximately 67 million vehicles in the United States and millions more globally. The defective airbags, prone to explosive deployments, have been linked to at least 28 deaths in the US and numerous injuries. Bankruptcy filing. In June 2017, Takata filed for bankruptcy due to the overwhelming costs associated with the recall and related liabilities. Criminal penalties. In 2017, Takata agreed to a $1 billion settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice, which included a $25 million fine, $125 million for victim compensation, and $850 million to compensate automobile manufacturers. PAS was originally a small company focusing on plastic parts like dashboards and interior materials for automobiles. During its rapid growth, it expanded by acquiring various domestic and foreign parts manufacturers, including TKT Precision, which had begun developing its own airbags. Founded by Tak Kwon-taek, TKT Precision was recognized as a strong small enterprise among domestic auto parts manufacturers. At the time, its scale, sales, and operating profit were insignificant compared to PAS. Yet unexpectedly, TKT was acquired by PAS. To put it metaphorically, it was like a shrimp swallowing a whale. This process had several unclear aspects. How did the acquisition happen? It's a familiar pattern. After years of investment, TKT Precision, a seatbelt manufacturer, developed a new type of airbag that passed the safety inspection by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. However, due to the critical nature of airbags, automobile manufacturers were reluctant to easily change their suppliers. Frustrated by the inability to secure supply contracts, TKT received an offer from Unsung Motors to supply airbags. President Tak Kwon-taek, having been in business for a long time, did not make mistakes. He carefully negotiated the supply contract, secured an advance payment from Unsung Motors, expanded production facilities, and hired staff to commence serious production. He delivered the products on the agreed date. The issue arose at this point. The airbags failed to pass Unsung Motors' internal safety inspection. In this case, the responsibility obviously lay with TKT Precision. While it was easy to point out problems, proving that there were none was not straightforward. If this continued, they would not only fail to receive payment but also be obligated to refund the advance and cover damages for breach of contract. Inquiries to the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport yielded only responses about settling disputes between companies. Attempts to find other customers to supply the airbags, which had also failed Unsung Motors' safety inspection, were futile. Debts and expansion costs returned like a boomerang. Unsung Motors faced delays of over 2 weeks in new vehicle releases. While seeking other suppliers, Unsung Motors threatened to claim damages from TKT Precision, putting TKT, a once healthy mid-sized company, on the brink of bankruptcy. At this point, PS proposed the acquisition, with the condition that it would inherit all debts and employment obligations. President Tak had no choice but to sell TKT Precision to PS at a bargain price. Even at a low price, the sale amount reached 30 billion won. At that time, PS lacked the ability to pay that much money. However, this issue was resolved very easily. Unsung Automotive directly loaned money to PS and guaranteed payment to the bank. The bank provided acquisition funds at a low interest rate, and ultimately, PS succeeded in acquiring TKT Precision. What happened next? It's an obvious story. Instead of filing a compensation claim, Unsung Automotive gave PS another chance. PS improved the airbags, though I'm not sure what exactly was improved, and delivered them, passing the safety inspection easily this time. From then on, PS became the exclusive supplier of airbags and seatbelts to Unsung Automotive, rising to the status of a crucial partner. Even now, airbags constitute the largest share of PAS sales. Taekyu crossed his arms and said, looking at this series of events, one might reasonably suspect that Unsung Automotive and PS colluded to defraud by acquiring TKT Precision. That's why CEO Tak Kwon-taek, who lost his company, tipped off the media and filed a lawsuit with the prosecution. What happened? As always, the media remained silent, and the prosecution dismissed the case, closing the matter. For reference, TKT Precision wasn't the only company acquired like this by PS. There have been companies forced into a corner through supply blockades and acquired for free. In any case, what's important now is that there might be a recall due to the airbag issue. What kind of defect could it possibly have? When unsure, it's best to ask someone who knows, right? Where? At Karos. I called Daryl. He answered my call cheerfully. It's been a while, Sue. How have you been? Of course, I'm doing well. How's the research lab? No problems at all. Vehicle sales are also recovering, inventory is nearly depleted, and factory utilization is rising. Originally, Karos had its headquarters in Silicon Valley. However, following its merger with Chrysler, the headquarters moved to Detroit, leaving the research facility behind. Due to the big one, the research facility was also relocated to Detroit. During this process, some key personnel who didn't want to leave Silicon Valley absconded, but now most of them have returned. This is because Silicon Valley has essentially disappeared. The relocation of the research facility and chaos within the U.S., along with the exodus of key personnel, temporarily halted research, but it has now returned to normal. A few months' delay in new car launch schedules is unavoidable, though. When will you be coming to Detroit? All the staff hope to see you. I want to see everyone too. Please send my regards. Once the greetings concluded, I got to the main point. Please send me the data on Unsung Motors airbags. What is the reason for this request? I've seen a few news articles and need to verify some information. Understood. I will organize and send it right away. The next day, while Taekyu was out, I skimmed through the materials sent by Karos. Among them, one paper stood out. The paper, published in a British journal, pointed out potential defects in Unsung Motors airbags. The author was Professor Park Pil-hyun from the Department of Automotive Engineering at Korea University. He was recognized as one of the leading automotive experts both domestically and internationally, having even received the title of Korea's first automotive master from the government. The reason it's in the past tense is that the master designation system was abolished after President Park Si-hyung took office. Since the domestic automotive market is monopolized by Unsung Motors, related experts are generally favorable towards them. However, Professor Park actively raised issues regarding defects regardless of the company involved. At one point, he pointed out a leaking defect in the engine room of a new car released by Unsung Motors. In response, rather than recalling the vehicle, Unsung Motors sued Professor Park for obstruction of business and defamation by spreading false facts. Everyone was speechless at the absurd situation where a large corporation sued an expert for pointing out product issues. Although the prosecution ended with no charges, since then, domestic experts have remained silent about defects in Unsung Motors products. Leaning back in my chair, I slowly read about the structure and principles of airbags. Typically, the inflator uses a substance called tetrazole. However, the airbags produced by PAS use ammonium nitrate. tetrazole and ammonium nitrate. But what exactly is an inflator? Naturally, we don't learn about these things in the humanities. After studying NCM and LFP due to batteries, now I have to learn about airbag inflators. More specialized terms followed in the text. I read it several times but still didn't understand well. Is this the limit of the humanities? In such cases, it's best to ask the author of the paper directly. I have no acquaintance with Professor Park, but surely I could get an introduction. I picked up the phone and called the head of the Business Administration Department after a long time. Hello, Professor Kim Young-jun. A familiar voice came through the phone. Who is this? My student and America's hero, Kong Jin-hoo. Is the embarrassment mine to bear? No. I'm no hero. Thanks to you, the kids in the business department are walking around with their heads held high. If you see anyone on campus with a stiff neck, they're from the business department. What's the reason for your call? I cautiously brought up the topic. I have a question for Professor Park Pil-hyun from the automotive department. Can you connect me, please? What? I thought it was a check-in call and it's for that? I'm a bit hurt. Oh, I'm sorry. I feel bad that I only reach out when I need something. Professor Kim Young-jun said with a smile. Just kidding. By the way, you aren't asking for a free introduction, right? This time I'll need a referral fee. I can't tell if he's joking or serious. How much? Let's say that we'll arrange a guest lecture at school later. The kids in the business department want to see you. What? If you don't want to, that's fine. I'll hang up now. Oh no. I'll do it. Good choice. I don't know the professor well, but I'll talk to him and let you know. Yes. Thank you. After the call ended, I waited for a moment. Was it about 15 minutes later? Professor Kim Young-jun texted me. You can call now as I arranged it. Don't forget the introduction fee. I replied with a thank you and immediately called the provided number. It connected right away as if they had been waiting. Hello. I said politely. Hello, Professor Park Pil-hyun. This is Kong Jin-hoo from the Department of Business Administration. I'm contacting you via Professor Kim Young-jun's introduction. Is it a good time to talk? Professor Park Pil-hyun laughed heartily. Oh, is this really Kong Jin-hoo? This is an honor. Can I brag about this to my kids at home? It's my honor, really. I've heard your name frequently. Haha, so what can I help you with? I was reviewing a paper you wrote and have a few questions. Which paper? The one about the Unsung airbag published in a British journal 3 years ago. That one. What are you curious about? You pointed out some issues in the paper and I'd like to know more details. It's all in the paper. You should understand if you read it. Since I'm in business, I'm not very familiar with this area. That makes sense. I also don't understand what other professors in different departments are talking about. To briefly explain, the airbag is crucial for protecting the driver's life and safety during an accident, so it must deploy immediately upon collision. The propellant is what initiates this process. It's compressed inside a metallic case called an inflator and bursts within 15 milliseconds once it receives an electrical signal. The gas produced causes the airbag to inflate. I see. I had no idea such scientific principles were involved in airbags. The key to the airbag is the propellant. They used sodium azide in the past, but nowadays they usually use tetrazole. However, PS uniquely uses ammonium nitrate. What's the reason? Because it can reduce costs. The proportion of the cost that the propellant accounts for is quite large, but the price of ammonium nitrate is only 1/10 of tetrazole. Plus, we can reduce the size, making it even more effective. So it was indeed aimed at cost reduction? This airbag was developed not by PAS but by TKT Precision. As a latecomer, they couldn't afford to overlook price competitiveness. Why don't other companies switch to ammonium nitrate? Because it's less safe. The airbag propellant needs to create just enough explosion to inflate the airbag. However, compared to tetrazole, ammonium nitrate is very unstable. It's mainly used in commercial explosives. Additionally, when it contacts water or in humid conditions, its explosiveness can increase rapidly. What happens then? If it causes more explosions than necessary, there's a risk of debris injuring passengers. There have actually been similar accidents in the past. That made my eyes widen. Then shouldn't there be a recall? I think so too, but it passed the safety inspection after all. In practice, if the humidity is low, there usually isn't a problem. To trigger a recall, we need to prove the danger. How can we prove that? Professor Park Pil-hyun replied simply. We can conduct direct crash tests. I actually wanted to do it while writing my paper, but it costs a lot. Unfortunately, I had to settle for substitute experiments. Automobile crash tests are conducted using dummies in the car, simulating various accident scenarios. The car and dummies used in a test must be scrapped afterward. However, the cost of a car is one thing, but the price of the dummies is also significant. Each dummy starts at 100 million won, with expensive ones exceeding 1 billion won. To carry out a proper experiment, at least several billion won are needed. I suggested to Professor Park. Then how about trying it this time? I'll cover the costs. The employees of Keros purchased dozens of vehicles from Unsung Motors while visiting their dealerships. Coincidentally, retail sales had dropped due to Big One, resulting in an overflow of inventory vehicles, and immediate shipments took place. Additionally, they bought Unsung vehicles in the used car market based on age and model. Surprisingly, these cars were headed to the Keros Research Institute in Detroit, where researchers began conducting crash tests on Unsung vehicles. This news quickly spread through the related industry. Park Si-hyung, who received the report, was taken aback. What is he trying to pull this time? Having faced so many setbacks lately, he was now stressed just thinking about what Kang Jin-woo might do next. What could be the reason for purchasing competitor vehicles and conducting crash tests? This is even against business ethics. Park Si-hyung immediately contacted Han Min-gu, the chairman of Unsung Motors. Have you heard the news? In response to Park Si-hyung's question, Han Min-gu replied in a serious voice. I have heard, Mr. President. What is Kang Jin-woo scheming? Do you have any idea? Upon checking, it seems they are investigating airbag issues. Professor Park Pil-hyun from Korea is overseeing the tests in Detroit. Park Si-hyung was shocked and almost dropped his phone. Is that really true? An airbag is a safety device designed to protect occupants of a vehicle during a collision by reducing the impact forces on their bodies. The car is equipped with sensors, accelerometers, gyroscopes, and pressure sensors that detect sudden deceleration or impact forces during a collision. When the sensors identify an impact that exceeds a certain threshold, they send a signal to the airbag control unit. The control unit triggers the inflator system within the airbag module. This system typically contains a chemical propellant or a compressed gas. The inflator rapidly generates a gas, usually nitrogen or argon, to fill the airbag. The bag inflates within 20 to 30 milliseconds after the collision is detected, creating a cushion between the occupant and hard surfaces, steering wheel, dashboard, or side panels. The airbag cushions the occupant's body, reducing the risk of serious injuries to the head, neck, and chest. It absorbs energy from the impact, slowing down the occupant more gently than a direct collision with hard surfaces. Once deployed, the airbag deflates almost immediately through small vent holes. This helps reduce the risk of suffocation and allows the occupant to move or exit the vehicle. Types of airbags equals front airbags, located in the steering wheel and dashboard for driver and front passenger protection. Side airbags, installed in the doors or seats to protect the torso and head inside collisions. Curtain airbags, deploy from the roofline to protect the head inside impacts or rollovers. Knee airbags, positioned below the dashboard to protect the legs. Airbags work in conjunction with seat belts, which keep occupants in the proper position for maximum airbag effectiveness. They are designed for one-time use. Once deployed, they need to be replaced. Inflator. The inflator is the mechanism inside the airbag module responsible for generating the gas that inflates the airbag. Typically consists of an igniter. This receives the electrical signal from the airbag control unit. A propellant chamber houses the material that produces gas. Filter systems. These cool and clean the gas before it fills the airbag. There are two main types of inflators. 1. Pyrotechnic inflators. Use a chemical propellant to produce gas. The chemical reaction generates heat, which rapidly produces nitrogen gas to inflate the airbag. 2. Compressed gas inflators. Use stored gases like argon or nitrogen under pressure. A small explosive charge punctures the gas canister, releasing the gas to inflate the airbag. 3. Hybrid inflators. Combine pyrotechnic and compressed gas technologies. A chemical reaction heats a pre-stored compressed gas, increasing inflation speed. Propellant. The propellant is the substance within the inflator that generates gas when burned. Common propellants include sodium azide Non-3 used in older airbag systems. Upon ignition, it decomposes to produce nitrogen gas. Non-azide propellants. Modern airbags use safer compounds like guanidine nitrate, which also produce nitrogen gas upon combustion. When the airbag control unit sends a signal, the igniter activates, generating heat to ignite the propellant. The propellant burns rapidly, producing gas in a controlled explosion. This gas inflates the airbag, creating a cushion to protect the vehicle's occupants. 5 years ago, there was an incident in the US where a parked car exploded and was completely destroyed. Unsung Motors retrieved the vehicle and conducted an investigation, revealing that the airbag was the cause. Ammonium nitrate deteriorated due to high humidity and caused the explosion. At that time, Unsung Motors first recognized the defect in the PAS airbag. Experts within the company asserted that the safety of ammonium nitrate was not fully proven and argued that the airbag supplier should be changed. If it had been another company instead of PAS, they might have done so. However, Unsung Motors was growing with various government benefits and could not change the supplier under these circumstances. Initially, they covered up the incident by paying a large compensation. However, accidents continued to occur afterward. It was common for airbags to deploy in minor collisions, and a more serious issue arose when they exploded with excessive force, sending metal or plastic fragments flying. In fact, a driver in Australia died after being pierced in the neck by metal fragments during airbag deployment. Fortunately for Unsung Motors, the incident did not become a major issue as the driver had already sustained a life-threatening impact. According to Unsung Motors' internal investigation, the defective products were extremely few and primarily involved vehicles operating for a long time in hot and humid regions. Han Mingu urgently stated, "If a defect is found and a recall is initiated, it will escalate beyond control." Recall. In politics, a faction primarily consists of groups sharing similar political beliefs. However, the faction known as the Pro-Park Group was more akin to an interest group gathered by mutual interests than a true political organization. When money and power disappear, how many will remain loyal to him until the end? PS was the most reliable shield to protect him when he left the presidency. However, if things went wrong, that shield could shatter. Park Si-hyung felt a shock that made his head spin. This was far more serious than the Hosong Savings Bank incident. While that merely concerned the morals of the regime, this was a matter related to survival. How likely do you think it is to discover a defect? It won't be easy. But the opponent is strong post-quake. That word was enough. Has he ever failed at anything he touched until now? I don't know how he figured it out, but if he is conducting collision test, he must have some level of certainty. The next words were even more shocking. The U.S. NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, is also closely monitoring this experiment. Due to the big one, global car sales have significantly decreased. Unsung Motors sales plummeted nearly 20% compared to the same period last year, and other automakers experienced similar declines. The situation at their U.S. branch was particularly dire. But what if a recall is necessary due to safety issues in this situation? Recall costs are a problem, but sales would drop even further than they already have. There would also be the fallout of corporate image damage and potential consumer class action lawsuits. We must prevent the aftermath. Park Si-hyung almost asked, how? Should they conduct another raid and fabricate absurd charges to take someone into custody? Doing so now would provoke the White House and American public opinion. Moreover, it's questionable whether the police and prosecutors would even follow such orders. After all, the president, as the head of the executive branch, isn't in a position to dictate who should be arrested. The mere fact that such orders had been given up to now was absurd. What should I do? I kept receiving reports about the collision experiment situation. It may be somewhat easier to trigger than other companies, but there are no major issues in a typical scenario. Professor Park Pil-hyun sounded excited, perhaps because he finally got to conduct the experiment he wanted. Each collision experiment cost over $100,000. Such opportunities are rare. So as soon as I proposed it, Professor Park packed his bags and headed to Detroit. Not only that, but students who wanted to observe the experiment and tour Kairos also joined him. Of course, I covered all the expenses. The Automotive Engineering Department at Korea University is among the top 3 in the country, and most graduates secure research positions in automotive-related companies. Who knows? Some of them might end up working at Kairos in the future. This time, we plan to increase the humidity for the experiment. Thank you for your hard work. Hard work is nothing. I'll report the results as soon as they come out. Understood. I hung up the phone and reviewed the materials sent from Kairos. They had categorized the items related to airbags in the Unsung Motors accidents. As I was engrossed in reading the materials, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Who could it be? As soon as I pressed the call button, a woman's voice came through. Hello, customer. I'm contacting you about a great insurance product because when you go to the hospital for an illness, the medical expenses might become... It's not a burden. I said that and hung up the phone. How did they get this number? Could it be that Chairman Im Jin-young also receives such calls? Just as I thought that, I actually received a call from Chairman Im. On a whim I asked him, do you sometimes receive phone calls about insurance consultations? Of course. I received a call earlier saying they could lend me up to 30 million won without collateral. Sometimes I also get voice phishing calls. Someone claiming to be an investigator from the prosecutor's office's cybercrime team told me I was registered under a suspicious account and insisted I transfer all my funds to a specified account. When I said my balance was 32 billion, they got angry and told me not to joke around. I burst out laughing. Haha, I can see how that sounded like a joke. Chairman Im Jin-young got to the point. Suddenly collision tests. What do you plan to do this time? Has the rumor spread this far already? By now, I doubt there's anyone who doesn't know. Today alone, Unsung Motors' market cap evaporated by 3 trillion won. As always, the quickest to react is the financial sector. As news of our collision tests broke, foreign and institutional investors started selling Unsung Motors as soon as the market opened. Meanwhile, securities analysts were diligently writing and posting Unsung Motors by recommendations. Seeing this, it's as if our country's securities firms are angels. To ensure individuals can buy such good stocks, they are selling off themselves. I summarized the situation for him. We suspect there's a defect in the airbags supplied by PS. We plan to uncover that through the collision test and request a recall. Chairman Im Jin-young jokingly replied. Recalling? That brings back bad memories. I also replied in jest. That's strange. I recall good memories. Haha, to be honest, I don't mention it, but even now I break into a cold sweat thinking about it. But you handled it well. How will Unsung Motors handle this situation? Chairman Im Jin-young cautiously asked. Is it out of resentment? Well, that might not be entirely wrong. Both Park Si-hyung and Unsung Motors have a bad connection. Unsung Motors ruined my family and as a result my father passed away. While the former is direct, the latter is indirect. And regarding Park Si-hyung, I'll skip further details. Automobiles are a key export item and a major industry that generates employment. Even if there are issues, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport will find it hard to issue a recall order easily. It's not just Park Si-hyung who is reluctant to issue recall orders. Previous administrations have been the same. This brings us to the so-called miraculous logic of Unsung Motors. When domestic consumers protest against discrimination for local cars, the response is, we use the same parts for both exports and imports. But when a recall is initiated overseas and domestic consumers request a recall, the response suddenly changes to, there are a few differences between exports and imports, so Korea does not qualify for a recall. The relevant agency, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, always stands back with folded arms. But if it were the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the story would be different. If a recall is executed in the U.S., it would be hard to avoid the repercussions here, wouldn't it? In reality, even if the vehicle models are the same, there can be slight variations depending on the country's climate, terrain, and living environment. For instance, in regions with heavy snowfall, snow tires might be standard equipment, while coastal areas might have an additional coat of rust-preventive paint. However, airbags are completely identical products. A recall isn't issued simply when defects are found in every product. In the case of the L6 out of millions, only about 100 had actual problems. Yet, because of that very small number, a total recall occurred, after which it was discontinued. Other automobile manufacturers are watching this situation with great interest. If a competitor's defect is discovered, they can sit back and let it unfold. You really intend to take down PS then? That's up to PS, not me. If they had made the airbags correctly, there shouldn't be a recall, right? Park Si-hyung engaged in various national projects, including resource diplomacy and siphon money into overseas accounts. However, that money cannot be used until laundering is complete. The only domestic funding source is PS. If problems arise, those who remained silent while receiving money may betray him. Looks like we'll have a lot of interesting developments ahead. We should also prepare. As I mentioned before, the Samsung Group is somewhat involved. Thanks to my junior, I'm glad to know in advance. The issue of collusion is not free from the Samsung Group either. However, with a new chairman, there may be many escape routes. After the call ended, I looked out the window. Tehran Street was still bustling with cars. Even if the proportion of foreign cars is high in Gangnam, more than half of them are Unsung cars. How much market share will Karos capture when it launches a new vehicle? Lost in thought, my phone rang again. It seems I'm getting a lot of calls today. This time it was an unknown number. I pressed the call button. I don't need any insurance or loans. Then the other party said, "Hello, this is CEO Kong Jin-hoo." "Who is this?" "This is Han Min-gu." I recalled the silver-haired elder I met briefly at a meeting hosted by President Ronald. "Hello." Chairman Han Min-gu said to me. "If it's all right, could we meet for a moment?" I entered a Japanese restaurant near Gwangwamun. As if it was prearranged, the staff guided me to the innermost room as soon as they saw me. The interior was narrow with a long corridor, resembling a hidden chamber. Upon opening the sliding door and stepping inside, Chairman Han Min-gu was already seated. He stood up and reached out his hand. "Nice to meet you, Kong Jin-hoo. It's been a while." "Yes, it has been a long time. This was our first meeting since the advisory meeting. A lot had happened in the meantime. Though he was nearing 80, he still looked vigorous, which is likely why he remains active in management." "What was the reason for calling me?" Chairman Han Min-gu smiled. "Well, what business could there be? I just wanted to meet with you and have a chat." Chairman Han Min-gu, a second-generation executive, is almost a living witness to the rise of Korea's automotive and industrial sectors. I sat down. I wondered what my father would have thought if he had seen me face-to-face with Chairman Han. "My father respected you greatly. He always said that without you, Unsung Motors wouldn't have become a global company, and we should be thankful that our family's livelihood depends on Unsung Motors." Chairman Han Min-gu nodded calmly. "I see." At that moment I sensed someone approaching outside. "One more person is coming. I apologize for not mentioning it earlier." The person who entered the room was an elderly man wearing a suit and glasses. He had a somewhat thin physique, a wrinkled face, thin lips and a pointed chin. He looked at me and said warmly, "It's our first time meeting like this. Nice to meet you." Honestly, it wasn't that pleasant. I have seen his face countless times on TV during this time. He has probably seen my face on TV to the point of being sick of it. Although we've had a long-standing bad relationship, this is the first time meeting face-to-face. "Hello." I shook hands with President Park Si-hyung. Perhaps it was just my feeling, but his hand felt cold. As soon as Park Si-hyung sat down, he immediately picked up his chopsticks and ate a piece of sashimi. Then, trying to act friendly, he said, "Let's talk while we eat first. The sea bream here is excellent. It's hard to find sashimi of this quality even at the Blue House." I smiled and shook my head. "I'm fine. There's a saying that you shouldn't make an enemy drink a glass of water or offer a piece of bread." I recalled memories of my father. In my memories, my father had a stern demeanor. Being a small business owner is no leisurely position. When delivery deadlines approached, he spent weekdays and weekends at the company, and whenever he finally came home after a long time, he would just sleep. Yet there were times when he made an effort for the family to dine out together or take trips to amusement parks or the beach. When I was young, I sometimes visited my father's company. The uncles in their oil-stained work clothes would call me the little boss and secretly give me pocket money. As I became a university student, I was busy hanging out with my girlfriend and studying, And my father was also busy with work, so we didn't see each other much. You only realize how important someone is when they're gone. It was only after he passed away that I understood what my father meant to me. If he were alive and saw me now, what would he say? Even if I gain the ability to see the future, I can't change the past. So I can never meet my father again. Eun Sung ruined our family and caused my father's death. And Park Si-hyung affected not just me but my mother, Taek-yu, and Senior Sang-yeep, all the precious people around me. So these two are undoubtedly my enemies. One is the chairman of a leading conglomerate in the country, and the other is the president. Ordinary people might feel some pressure in front of such figures. Didn't a reporter once say that President Park Si-hyung had an aura like having 100 fluorescent lights turned on? I had hoped to feel that aura upon meeting him, but unfortunately it was absent. Anyway, those reporters. Furthermore, I found it quite uninspiring. Thinking back, I've met even more impressive individuals. James C. Goldman, CEO of Golden Gate. Warren Buffett, chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. Ronald Stampler, the President of the United States, and more. Compared to them, Park Si-hyung is nothing. Enemies? That's quite a statement. Perhaps because I called them my enemies to their faces, both Han Min-gu and Park Si-hyung looked taken aback. Park Si-hyung laid down his chopsticks as if he had lost his appetite. Well, I guess only I can think that way. The one who hit doesn't care much. It's just the one who got hit who feels wronged. I looked at Chairman Han Min-gu and asked, "You know TE Engineering, right?" He sighed and replied, "I've heard about it. Did you give direct orders?" Chairman Han Min-gu shook his head at my question. I didn't know such things were happening. This statement was probably true. In Korea, it's common for large corporations to steal technology from small businesses and cut off supplies. DHK Engineering is just one of many companies supplying Unsung Motors' third-tier vendors. There likely wasn't even a need to report to the chairman. How many small businesses have Unsung Motor ruined in this way? If it weren't for me, they wouldn't even have had to know such companies existed. Park Si-hyung spoke as if giving advice. When I was younger, I went through a lot of things. I know from running a business that I've experienced plenty of unfair situations. Is he pulling out his classic, "I've been through it" series? To struggling small business owners, he'll say, "I've run a business before." To unemployed youths, "I've worked before." And even to flood victims, "I've been homeless before." Is it any wonder people say the only thing Park Si-hyung hasn't done is serve in the military? Why don't we forget all the bad things and focus on doing well moving forward? I tilted my head in confusion. I'm not sure what you expect from me. I don't understand why I have to forget all the bad things that have happened until now. There are things in the world that cannot be forgotten even if you want to. And shouldn't these words come from the victim? If the perpetrator who hit says to forget and move on, what does that make the victim? Park Si-hyung pressed his thin lips tightly together. Wait, could he really think of himself as the victim? If there's a misunderstanding, shouldn't we resolve it right here? Is that so? I asked him. I heard that Secretary Lee Il-seon from the Blue House directed the Parents Association to rally in Dongtan. Do you have something to say about that? Park Si-hyung looked regretful. I had no idea that was happening. This is a farcical result of the Secretary's excessive loyalty. What era are we in for such things to happen? In any case, the mistake of my subordinates is my mistake, so I will apologize. I nodded. I see. Then what about the National Intelligence Service employee who commented that my mother was spending her son's money at host bars? Is that also just excessive loyalty? Did that happen? The prosecution that arrested my friend, the National Intelligence Service surveilling employees, the National Tax Service conducting tax audits. There are many civil servants in this country whose loyalty overwhelms their judgment. Thinking I was being sarcastic, Park Si-hyung's expression hardened slightly. I was just speaking the truth. And speaking of excessive loyalty, exactly whom are they being loyal to? The president doesn't break open a piggy bank to pay their salaries. They are all paid with taxpayers' money. Of course, the ones they should be loyal to are not the president but the nation and its people. Corruption related to power cannot be committed alone. It is only possible with the collaboration of subordinates. Time and again they willingly acted as shields for the president whenever problems arose. When the illegal surveillance issue of the National Intelligence Service arose in the past, there were suspicions that the Blue House was involved. At that time, Deputy Director Lee Myung-ho claimed he was the mastermind, taking full responsibility. Later, in the first trial, he received a 1-year prison sentence with a 2-year suspended sentence for abuse of power. Both the prosecution and Lee Myung-ho did not appeal, so the sentence was finalized. Eventually, it was forgotten by everyone. Where is Lee Myung-ho now and what is he doing? Surprisingly, he started a subcontracting company supplying PAS and became a proper CEO. Hong Man-ho, who stepped down from the prosecutor general position due to the excessive investigation, was approached by a law firm that counts Unsung Motor as its biggest client. Yoon Se-won, the director of the NIS, found a position as an outside director for Unsung's primary vendor. It's likely that Lee Il-seon, the Blue House secretary currently in hiding, has also secured a position somewhere. Burying someone who needs to be silenced in concrete or on a mountain is an old method. With money and power, most things can be resolved. However, Park Si-hyung's term has only a few months left. By February next year, after the presidential election, the president's term will also end. If not Unsung Motor and peace, how can any promises of compensation be made? Silence lingered in the room for a while. I broke the silence and asked, "What did you want to see me about?" Chairman Han Min-gu replied, "I heard you're conducting crash tests with Unsung Motor at Keros." Yes. What went wrong? Analyzing competitors' products by purchasing them is something every company does. Samsung Electronics, for example, thoroughly disassembled and analyzed the iPhone when they first made smartphones, leading to the launch of the L1. Subsequently, Apple sued Samsung Electronics for $2.5 billion in patent infringement. Analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of competitors' products is normal, but conducting crash tests is unusual. It's essentially a public declaration of intent to identify weaknesses. Other automakers are paying close attention to this incident. They are simply waiting to see what happens, as if one competitor falls, it may benefit them in this already tough market. What is the reason? I asked frankly. I'm suspecting a faulty airbag. We want to keep this in mind when we receive the airbag supply later. Chairman Han Min-gu drank water, his throat dry. I had been thirsty as well but hadn't touched the cup before me. Please stop the crash tests. Why must we do that? If Unsung Motors shakes, the entire domestic manufacturing industry will shake. I'm sure Seo Kong-jin, who knows this well. Most small to medium enterprises in our country are subcontractors for large corporations. So when a big corporation coughs, small businesses catch a cold. Consumer sentiment has stagnated due to the shock from Big One, and car sales have plummeted. If issues arise at Unsung Motors during this time, companies already at their limits will go bankrupt one after another. For those companies, it's unfair damage without any wrongdoing. Park Si-hyung spoke up. Shouldn't we consider the national economy? To think we're still being business-friendly in such a situation. I get that as an economic president you prioritize the economy. I can't tell if they're worried about the national economy or PS. I found it ridiculous and laughed. It seems both of you are under some grand misunderstanding. What do you mean? Convincing me to stay quiet isn't going to solve anything. There have been quite a few cases of Unsung Motors airbags exploding and malfunctioning. More than a dozen people have died. I checked, and these incidents were mostly in older cars and regions with high humidity. The PAS airbag was installed about 6 years ago, right? If there are no defects, there would be no issues. But if there truly are defects, the explosions are just beginning. They must have understood my words. Up until now, the incidents have only been the beginning. How many more airbags will explode in the future? Can they keep hiding this indefinitely? What I'm trying to express isn't about social justice or a strong conscience. A company is a group that seeks profit. So how can a company achieve profits? When the recalled L6 exploded again, Chairman Lim Jin-yong made the decision to discontinue without delay. The damages at the time were enormous, but ironically that decision saved Samsung Electronics. If they had delayed and responded passively, they would have had to truly withdraw from the smartphone market. Chairman Han Min-gu spoke in a heavy voice. We need time. Time should have been sufficient until now. Didn't you already recognize the airbag defect 5 years ago? Given various circumstances, Unsung Motors recognized the problem with the airbags relatively early. If they had responded quickly, then there would have been no issue. So why did they take no action? The reason is, of course, that the supplier of the airbags was PS. Toyota also recognized the unintended acceleration defect but concealed it for 6 years. When this fact came to light, the U.S. Department of Justice imposed a fine of $1.2 billion and brand trust plummeted. If it is revealed that Unsung Motors also knew and concealed the facts this time, a similar situation will occur. A company can produce defective products. However, concealing it while being aware of it is something that's hard to forgive. Park Si-hyung looked me straight in the eye and asked, "What exactly do you want?" "Well," Chairman Han Min-gu looked at me and said, "I sincerely regret and apologize for your father's situation. I would kneel and apologize in front of his grave." The chairman of Unsung Motors apologizing to my father. What would my father have thought if he heard this? My father is not at a grave but in a columbarium. These days, don't most people choose cremation? Well, chaebol might prefer burial since they have ancestral graves, but anyways, both of their thoughts are messed up. Instead of apologizing to my father who has passed away, shouldn't we be worried about the customers of Unsung Motors who might face similar fate in the future? Business people calculate everything in terms of money. So, how much is a human life worth? If dozens are to die in the future, is it enough to just avoid the immediate losses from a recall? I pulled out a few photos from my pocket and placed them on the table. They were photos of fragments pulled from the crash test vehicle. Metal shards were embedded in the chest, neck and face. These are the photos I received before coming here. I confirmed that shards flew up towards the upper chest depending on the airbag deployment direction. The metal shards completely pierced the neck. Airbags are the last safety device to protect the occupant's lives in an accident, but this is just a lethal airbag. At this point, it might be safer if the airbag doesn't deploy at all. Park Si-hyung and Han Min-gu looked at the photos with shocked expressions. The collision tests were conducted under expert supervision and were fully recorded. Now, it just needs to be revealed that this isn't merely a coincidental accident but a structural defect. Professor Park Pil-hyun is already working on it. What will happen if this matter comes to light? Unsung Motors may not be affected, but PAS will surely go bankrupt. And the relationship between Unsung Motors and PAS, and whose PAS actually is, will come back into question. I stood up. I'll be leaving now. I have an appointment. As I was about to leave the room, I heard Park Si-hyung's voice from behind. "Do you really think you'll be safe after this? Is he still acting like he's the president? I appreciate his concern, but wouldn't it be better to worry about yourself first?" Park Si-hyung had a mixed expression of shock and anger at my words. Well, who could say such things in front of the sitting president? I'm only saying it because it's me. And telling him to worry about himself is not a joke. After leaving the sushi restaurant, I got into the waiting car. Taekyu, who was at the wheel, started the car immediately. What if someone follows us? Why? Are you worried about an assassination? They could disguise it as a car accident. Have you watched too many movies? Would it end just because I disappear? So what were they saying? Obvious stuff. I summarized the conversation inside for him. The problem isn't just the airbag defect, but the bigger issue is the cover-up. After the Toyota unintended acceleration defect cover-up, the related laws in the US were strengthened. If it's revealed that they intentionally concealed a known defect, the responsible person could face life imprisonment. Then who in PAS is responsible? The CEO or the actual owner? I don't know. Taekyu laughed. It's a great opportunity to test brotherly loyalty. I nodded. To do that, we need to find evidence that proves the cover-up was intentional. I was reviewing the crash test data sent from Keros when someone came to see me. Like before, but especially after Big One, many people wanted to meet me. When someone visits, they usually write their name in the lobby and send it to the secretary's office, and I generally check it myself. 4 founders or developers, company employees conduct meetings, but I do not accept any politicians, civic groups, charitable organizations, classmates, or friends. However, the person who came this time was different. As soon as I heard his name and reason for visiting, I instructed them to send him up. A moment later, a man in his mid-40s entered the CEO's office. I stood up to greet him. Nice to meet you. I'm Kong Jin-hoo. Hello. I'm Tak Won-sik. He was none other than the son of TKT Precision CEO Tak Kwon-taek. We sat across from each other at the table. Would you like some coffee? Yes. He looked at me somewhat intimidated. It must have felt like an ordinary person meeting the second son of a chaebol or a large corporation's chairman. The secretary brought in the coffee. "What brings you to see me?" He spoke cautiously. "Chairman. Just call me Jean Hu comfortably. To the employees I'm the representative but not to others. Please don't be nervous and speak freely." "Ah, understood." At my words he appeared somewhat more relaxed as he spoke. "I saw an article about crash testing for Unsung cars being conducted in the US. It wasn't necessarily secretive, and news had already spread in the industry before being reported by the US media. Korean media are still silent, but articles are gradually leaking out, primarily through online news outlets." "That's right." He looked at me and asked, "Is it because of the airbag?" "The purpose of the crash tests has never been publicly disclosed." "You know quite well." He nodded. "I was at the company then as well. I was involved in the airbag development." "Does your father know about this?" He shook his head. "He passed away 2 years ago." I felt an inexplicable connection to his pain. "It must have been tough for you." "It wasn't too difficult. After my father gave up on reclaiming the company, he vowed never to engage in business again and built a few buildings." "Ah." Unlike DHK Engineering, which supplied to third-party vendors, TKT Precision was a mid-sized company capable of developing airbags. Moreover, unlike their completely failed family business, they sold their company for 30 billion won. If they had built properties with that money, the whole family would have lived without any issues. A property owner above the creator, right? Connection in pain. My foot. When developing the airbag, my father made the decision to use ammonium nitrate as a propellant instead of tetrazole. All the in-house engineers opposed this. They believed it was too dangerous to use a substance whose safety had not been proven. But my father did not listen to that and pressed on with his own intention. If you make the same product as existing companies at a similar price, there's no competitiveness. It must have been an unavoidable choice for a latecomer. I never imagined my father would have flaws. I learned about it only after losing the company. The elders who you thought were perfect in your growing up years are not all that perfect. They have faults. And one day you will have to decide if they are for your good or your bad. Then you may also realize that you may have to fight them for the good. Mahabharat. Even though the CEO changed, the developers and employees still remained in the company. They informed Tak Kwan-taek about the incident, and he was reportedly shocked when he heard the news. My father lived with guilt for the rest of his life after hearing that someone died because of the airbag he created. Whenever he drank, he lamented that he was a murderer. "Did you ever try to raise awareness about the truth?" He sighed as he spoke. "Why wouldn't I? I first informed Unsung Motors and PS of the facts. I told them that it was fine not to get the company back, but please stop the sale of the airbags. They certainly didn't listen. I reported it to the media and filed complaints everywhere, but it was useless. They viewed it as a grudge for losing the company, and Unsung Motors sued my father for defamation. Just like with Professor Park Pil-hyun. It seems that if you point out defects, you must be prepared for punishment. So what happened?" He spoke with a bitter expression. "I had no choice but to reach a settlement with Unsung Motors. They agreed to drop the lawsuit after I promised not to claim any rights to the company anymore, not to raise issues regarding the airbags, and to keep the settlement confidential. Fighting against a large corporation is a long and lonely struggle. It's understandable that they reached a settlement without fighting to the end." He took out a file and USB from the bag he brought. "This is the information my father gathered until his passing." I opened the file and examined the documents inside. The accident cases were the first to catch my eye. Although we were also collecting information on airbag incidents, astonishingly, the materials provided by Tak Kwan-taek were organized in more detail. There were documents showing the numerous times the dangers of the airbags were reported to Unsung Motors and PAS, as well as records of complaints to the prosecution, the Fair Trade Commission, Consumer Protection Agency, and the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, along with the settlement agreement. Creating a defective product is a mistake. However, hiding the defect after recognizing it is intentional. This is not only unethical but also carries legal responsibility. This is clear evidence that they concealed the defect knowing about it. I can't believe such important information came to me so easily. Are you giving this to me out of revenge? He shook his head at my question. I hold no grudge or resentment against Unsung Motors and PS. It's funny, but if PS hadn't acquired it, TKT Precision would have had to take responsibility. I lost my hard-earned orchard just before harvest. But it turned out I was growing poisoned apples. The person who seized it unknowingly picked the apples and sold them to people. My father suffered until the moment he closed his eyes, knowing he produced a defective product that caused people to die. Now I want to relieve that burden. Please ensure that no more victims arise from that airbag. And I hope you tell that my father tried to reveal the truth. The problem started with President Tak Kwan-taek. If he hadn't developed airbags using ammonium nitrate as an inflator, this wouldn't have happened. At least President Tak Kwan-taek tried to take responsibility for his mistake until the end. But both Unsung Motors and PS were too busy hiding the truth. If anyone had been willing to correct it, things wouldn't have escalated to this point. I nodded. I will definitely do that. At my words, Tak Kwan-taek looked relieved. Thank you, Jin-Hoo. Karos held a press conference at headquarters to announce the results of the Unsung car crash tests. Professor Park Pil-hyun, who supervised the crash tests as an external expert, presented the findings himself. He first revealed videos and photos from the crash tests. As a slow-motion replay showed metal fragments flying out when the airbag deployed, striking the dummy's face and neck, people watching were taken aback. Of the hundreds of crash tests conducted, most airbags were fine, but vehicles that have operated for a long time in high-humidity areas are more likely to have airbags deploy on minor impacts or generate a strong explosive force, increasing the risk of debris flying. Reporters asked questions. Are there any related accident cases? A researcher who also participated in the experiment responded. Approximately 200 accidents have occurred in the past 5 years, with an estimated 13 fatalities. To prevent further damage, all vehicles equipped with PAS airbags should undergo an immediate recall for replacement. As shocking as that was, it didn't end there. Now the U.S. Department of Justice stepped in. Unsung Car and the manufacturer PS are suspected of having known about the airbag defect for a long time but concealed it. We have secured sufficient evidence and will summon related individuals for investigation. This situation heightened sensitivities regarding safety, especially following the Big One incident. The revelation of a critical defect in Unsung car airbags, and the fact that it was hidden for 5 years, was enough to ignite public outrage among the American people. The U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Department of Justice immediately began investigations into Unsung car and PAS, while considering mandatory recall orders. The U.S. political sphere agreed to hold hearings. A boycott of Unsung cars erupted nationwide, having their sales. The news quickly reached Korea. As soon as the market opened, Unsung car shares plummeted by 18%, with group stocks like Jecheil, Glomas, and Linus also showing significant declines. Wow, that's incredible. How did they find out about the airbag defect? Oh, insane. They really blew it after the earthquake. Unsung car and PS are going down hard. Is it the last round of Otaku versus the president? Is the airbag defect for real? I heard the U.S. Department of Justice is investigating. I'm doomed. I drive an Unsung car. My car must have a killer airbag installed too. Yeah. If you have an accident, you'll die. It's a death sentence. The US will recall, but what about Korea? They'll probably say it's the miracle logic of Unsung cars. They'll claim domestic and export cars are different, so no recall. Won't they say Korean consumers are tough enough to handle metal fragments sticking in their faces? If the airbag recall happens, won't PAS go down? The president's term is ending. What will happen if PAS collapses too? Who will take responsibility at PAS? The figurehead? Or the president? Why did they turn Kang Jin-Hoo into an enemy? Ah, the president has really become the enemy this time. The president turned into an enemy. An enemy-like president. The U.S. Prosecutor's Office is simultaneously searching the U.S. branch of Unsung Motors while sending an official document to the Korean government. They requested information regarding the reports and outcomes of complaints made by CO Tak Kwan-taek to the Prosecutor's Office and the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. They also asked for cooperation to ensure that the CEO and executives of PAS can attend congressional hearings in the U.S. Unsung Motors and PS have not issued any significant explanations. Even when reporters gathered, they remained silent, stating they were in the process of organizing their positions. In an already chaotic situation, two events occurred simultaneously in Korea. One was the police arresting a female employee of the National Intelligence Service, NIS, at an officetel who had written hundreds of comments under the nickname Jinhu Hyosu. When the police knocked on the door, the employee locked it and held out while contacting the NIS. The NIS contacted the police, asking them to wait as they would handle it themselves, but the police ignored this and forcibly broke the door down. Inside the officetel, it was decorated like a PC room, where NIS staff rotated through hundreds of IDs to post and comment. They even distributed photos with the face of Kang Jin-woo superimposed on pornographic images. Lee Il-seon, an aide at the Blue House who had taken leave and gone into hiding, voluntarily presented himself to the police. They had threatened to forcibly summon him if he did not appear by today. He stood in front of the cameras with his head bowed. "I apologize to the citizens for causing social controversy." Reporters immediately began firing questions. "Do you admit to directing the protests by conservative groups? Why did you issue such orders? Was it you who gave the instructions?" In response, he said, "It is true that I made contact, but I only acted according to instructions." The reporters were shocked. "If it wasn't you, then who gave the orders? Is there a higher authority involved? How far up does this go?" Lee Il-seon calmly addressed the reporters. "All instructions were given by the president. I was just playing the role of conveying them."